The primary focus of this channel is to help new and beginning screenwriters, but if you write in other mediums, there's a lot of stuff here for you. Just realize that everything kind of revolves around screenwriting, and so I thought it would be fun to take a recent movie and look at it and try to extrapolate what are some lessons that we can learn about screenwriting from that film. So I've chosen Tenet. If you've not watched it, just be aware there's probably going to be some spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking if you find value. Subscribe if you haven't done that. I really appreciate it. There's some links below. Be sure to check those out. Let's jump in. You're probably aware that Tenet has received some mixed reviews. Here's a sampling. I took these from Rotten Tomatoes. Some of you are familiar with that site. If you're not, be sure to check it out. But the overall critique about Tenet is either inaccessibility or lack of caring for the characters in spite of the clever and creative plot, in which the story actually ends in linear time before it begins. And if you're a fan of other Christopher Nolan films, you know many of them deal with time and reality and our perception of each of those things. Tenet is no exception. So let's get into 5 lessons we can learn about screenwriting from this film, Tenet. And there's some good, some bad, and some ugly, so just be aware. We're going to kind of cover all of them. Number 1, and this is a good one, the effective use of plant and payoff. Plant and payoff is a storytelling tool that essentially what you do is you plant something early on and then you pay it off later in the film, and it feels satisfying because the audience is kind of able to discover some things along the way, and it makes it feel like an Easter egg in some ways for the audience. Sometimes though there is plant and payoff for characters as well, so the audience and a character or a group of characters notices a plant and then notices a payoff later on, and that's really the case with Tenet. There is a lot of plant and payoff. Now, part of it is because of the nature of the story. We're moving forward in time, backward in time, so we're kind of back and forth, and so we learn things at one point and then they show up again later. In some ways, those are just critical for the plot to make sense, but they are also just very satisfying for the audience to watch because we start noticing all the little things and tidbits around. And there's 2 moments specifically that I just want to draw attention to for an example. One is early on, we learn that a character, Kat, that she has come back to a boat where her husband is supposedly at, Sater, and sees a woman diving off of the boat. And she is just like in kind of turmoil about her marriage and relationship with her husband.
You know how I dream of just diving off that boat.
And lo and behold, later in the story, she becomes that woman. She does dive off the boat, and that's part of the plot stuff going on. But we get the plant early on. It's separated by a lot of time, which is one of the things you want with plant and payoff, and then it pays off really nicely at the end. The second one is the red string with the washer on the backpack. Now, early on in the story, in the opera scene, the opening kind of set piece, we see our main character see a person with a backpack with this string with a washer on it. Later in the story, he's trying to do something and he notices a person who is dead who has the string with the washer on the backpack. And we're like, oh, that person is dead here, but it helped him in the future, so they're kind of moving in and out of time and back and forth. So who is this person? And then at the very end, Robert Pattinson's character Neil turns around and we see, and the main character sees, the string with the washer on the backpack, putting everything together that this guy's been kind of helping all along. So they have a deeper relationship that our main character didn't really know about. And it's just such a great payoff, because if you've been noticing that all throughout, it just feels so satisfying because you become aware of it when the character becomes aware of it, and it's just such a satisfying thing. So the storytelling tool of plant and payoff is a really great tool to use, and if you want a masterclass on how to do it, then watch Tenet and pay attention to all of the plant and payoffs that happen, because there's way too many for me to even list in a short YouTube video. Lesson number 2, you need to properly motivate your characters, and you need to let the audience in on that motivation. And in this one, in the case of Tenet, this one's kind of an ugly one. Like, this one just doesn't really work. Now, some of this, you could argue, is intentional. I mean, the name of the main character, if you look at the credits, the name of the main character, his name is Protagonist. Like literally that's his name, is protagonist. And every time anybody asks him his name, he dodges the question. We never get his actual name. It's just protagonist. So there is on one level the sense that we're supposed to disassociate from the protagonist. But what it does is it makes us not really care, and it makes us not really understand his motivation for doing what he's doing. I mean, we only learn a few things about him early on and really throughout the whole story. He was in the military because he mentions that he was in basic training. He mentions he was in the CIA, or some people are talking about the CIA, so we can kind of infer that he's working for the CIA, at least at the beginning. That he doesn't drink when he's on the job, and he prefers Diet Coke. And outside of that, that's about all we really learn about what he's doing. Now, we do learn one other critical thing about him, and that is that he wants to see the mission through to the end. He cares more about completing the mission in some ways than he does about anybody else. And at first it seems like he's trying to help this woman, but he's really just using her to try to complete the mission, to do what he's trying to do. And this is actually a problem, because if we don't care and understand why a character is doing something, or care about who they are and what they're about, even if we disagree with them. It doesn't matter if we disagree with them, but we have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And if we don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, then whenever they're doing something, we don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. We're not sure, like when protagonist goes off and does something, we're like, okay, do I want this to go well, or do I not want it to go well? And we don't even know what we're really rooting for as the story goes on. And the reason that we don't know what we're rooting for is this lack of character motivation, this lack of understanding why the character cares about solving this problem, or, just all the people that he's pulling in. Now, yes, on some level you could say, well, he cares about saving the world. Okay, well, but so does every other movie. Like, I don't care about that. I want to know, like, what's the personal connection? Why does he feel so strongly about doing this one specific thing? Like, who is he trying to save? He obviously doesn't really care about anybody. So I'm not sure why he's doing what he's doing. And what that does, because there's a lot of complication and stuff with the plot, is it separates me and it helps me make it harder to understand what's going on in the story and all the little plot twists and reversals and things like that. I don't really know if those are good things or bad things, or if I should notice them or not, because the main character isn't reacting emotionally to them. So I, as an audience, don't know how to emotionally respond. So one of the things you need to make sure you're doing in your stories, or at least try to do this, is make sure that the character is emotionally responding in some way, even if it's very small. So it can be very small, but they need to respond in some way. We need to know why they care about what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. If we don't, what it does is it causes us to not really want to participate in the story. Now, there's a lot of visual eye candy in Tenet, so that kind of helps keep us in tune with the story, but if it weren't for that, man, a lot of people probably would have checked out. A third lesson we can learn from Tenet is another good one, and that's the use of theme. Theme is a really critical element in story. I mean, if you just break story down, there's like 5 pieces: plot, character, conflict, theme, setting. Like, you need those to really have a story. So you've got to have a theme. And Tenet has a really great use of its theme. And yes, any individual that watches it, we might take something else out of it. But there's a theme that just keeps cropping up in the film and in the dialogue of one of the characters, specifically the character of Neil. And in some ways, Neil is kind of acting like a vessel for the theme. And the phrase he keeps saying is,
"What's happened's happened."
And yet, the protagonist keeps trying to change the past or alter the past. But Neil has a different perspective on it. He's coming at it with a, look, you can't really change it. You can interact with it, and you can make new choices going forward that might shift some other things, but whatever's happened, and that's happened. Like, you just kind of gotta deal with it.
I warned you. What's happened's happened. I get it now.
And the reason this is really good for theme is because the two main characters have a very different perspective on the theme. This element of, can you change the past? If something's happened to you, can you alter it? And one of them is really trying to alter the past, like go back, change the past. The other one's saying, look, what's happened, happened. You just kind of deal with it. You can interact with it. You can learn from it, but you got to move forward. And the thing about themes is that they are universal. I mean, there's probably stuff in your life, just like for me, there's stuff in my life that I look back on and I think, man, I wish I would have done that different. I wish I would have changed that. I wish I would have done a different thing. But the thing is, what's happened has happened. I can't change it. I can interact with it. I can try to process it. I can try to deal with it, but I need to learn from it and I need to move on. I can try to do things differently down the road, but I can't change the past. I can't dwell in the past. I've still got to move forward. And this is what makes themes great, is because they're universal. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter where you're watching this, where you're living, where you hang your hat, so to speak, every day. It doesn't matter. You can connect to this theme of something where, oh, I did this thing, I wish I hadn't have done it. And sometimes we dwell in the past, or we see other people in our life dwelling in the past, and we don't want to do that, right? Like, what's happened, move forward. And this is kind of the theme of Tenet. It's like saying like, hey, all this stuff has happened, so just move forward. Just try to do the best you can moving forward. So when we talk about theme for Tenet, thumbs up for sure on this one. Lesson number 4 from Tenet. There is a fine line between mystery and confusion. Now, mystery is usually a good thing as long as it's resolved. Confusion can sometimes be a good thing as long as it doesn't last too long, or as long as the audience has faith in the story that confusion is going to be alleviated. If you've watched Tenet, you probably know, like, yeah, I was confused for a lot of it. And while it's not hard to track, it's very complex, and there's lots of little nuances, and some of the science, when you step back and think of it, like, that doesn't work. Like, people can only move backward in time, they can't move forward in time except by living. It's parts of it are very confusing. So you're like, how did those people get in the future? I don't understand. And what's going on is there's just a lot of complexity there, and complexity is not a bad thing. Confusion, yeah, kind of a bad thing. Now, can you confuse your audience a little bit to just kind of keep them off balance? Well, yeah, that's actually a really good storytelling technique. Sometimes you want to confuse them. Sometimes you want to throw the audience off balance a little bit just to keep them on their toes, to keep them paying attention. The problem with Tenet is that line between mystery and confusion just gets obliterated. So there's some mystery there, and we're trying to understand what's going on. The problem is we just keep getting confused because more and more information keeps getting piled on, and because, as mentioned earlier, we don't understand the character motivation. We're not sure, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And now I'm not sure what to root for, and all of a sudden we're confused. What makes it even more complicated in the case of Tenet is you have these sequences. Now, sequences are kind of like mini movies within a movie to help you structure things. So we've got a couple of sequences in Tenet, and one of them is, will protagonist get the painting that is held in storage somewhere so that Kat will help him do a thing? I mean, you start thinking like, wait, so he's got to do this one thing to get this other thing, to have her help him do this other thing that he wants to then do. And it's like, how does this fit? Like, there's got to be a simpler way. There's got to be a less confusing way. And that's really the issue, is can you find a simpler way? Now, to be fair, it is perhaps that Nolan wanted to confuse you. Maybe he wanted the audience sitting there scratching their head going, wait, I don't understand what's going on, just to force them to wrestle with that. And that's one of the benefits of confusion, is it forces the audience to reflect on and try to make sense of the confusion, because our natural tendency is to resolve things. We want things to be resolved. And if it's not resolved, we're going to work to try to resolve it. So can you use confusion in a story? Yes, you can. You just have to be careful with how you use it. And in this case with Tenet, it's hard to root for the characters or to choose a side. You're just kind of like watching something unfold. You're not participating in it because of the confusion. It's keeping you from participating because the things are so far to go. And getting the painting so that Kat will not be blackmailed by Sator, so that protagonist can get a conversation with Sator to be able to go figure out a clue about the algorithm to do this time. Like, what in the world is going on? It's too many jumps. And it's not that audiences can't follow and can't track with it. It's just that it's creating confusion. It's creating a barrier for your audience to participate that you probably don't really want. Now, again, maybe Nolan wanted this confusion. So I'm not saying that he didn't do what he was wanting to do. Maybe he intended to do it. What I'm trying to communicate here is that if you're trying to write a screenplay, one of the things you need to pay attention to is not overly confusing your audience. Or if you're going to confuse them for specific reasons and to get specific outcomes. And if you're getting those outcomes, then it's fine to use confusion. Otherwise, be aware of the confusion and don't confuse complexity with confusion. Things can be very complex and not confusing. So you can have complex and kind of simple in a sense, or at least understandable, or you can have complex and confusing, but you can also have simple and confusing where people are doing stuff that just doesn't make sense. So just try to avoid confusion if you can, and if you're going to use it intentionally. Before we get to the last one, number 5, which is actually a great lesson that we can learn from Tenet, it would really help me out, and I really appreciate it if you just interact in some way. If you're finding value, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, ring the bell, leave a comment below, maybe leave a comment about what was confusing about Tenet or not, or if you agree or disagree with some of the things that I am mentioning. I say it's a bad thing, maybe you think it's a good thing. So drop that in the comments below. You can also share it across social media. YouTube actually really likes all those interactions, so I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. All right, lesson number 5 that we can learn from Tenet, and this one again is a really great one, and that's Nolan's use of subtext. Subtext is really challenging to do, at least to do well. I mean, you can do it because we do it in normal life all the time. You just don't realize that you're doing it because you're processing it a little different. When you're writing a story, you have to kind of intentionally, sort of, put in subtext. There are other things and other layers that are going on because you have the characters talking about this thing, but they're on the surface, but they're really talking about this thing. One of the things about Tenet, though, that's really great is you have the characters talking on this level about something, but they're really talking about this. So we've got another level underneath. But then there's also kind of a meta subtext that happens underneath. And that's especially true in the conversations between protagonist and Priya. Now, nearly every conversation they have has some element of this, what's on the surface, what's underneath, and then this kind of meta subtext. So let me give you a couple of examples.
To get anywhere near it, I would take a fresh-faced protagonist. And you, how fresh as a daisy. What did you find in the woods?
2 antagonists, 1 inverted.
You've done your part.
My part. I'm the protagonist of this operation.
You are a protagonist. Did you think you were the only one capable of saving the world?
I realized I wasn't working for you. We've both been working for me. I'm the protagonist.
Now, if you're listening through all this, Nolan is giving a nod to everyone who just loves stories. I mean, his main character is named Protagonist, and they're talking about a protagonist and literally the protagonist. It's kind of this level beneath a level beneath a level. It's just really great. And if you look back through these conversations, you can almost hear Nolan saying things like, do something new in your storytelling. Make sure you have multiple antagonists or antagonistic forces. Make your protagonist capable and uniquely suited for your story. There can't be more than one. It's your character's story. They are the protagonist. So if you want some solid examples of subtext, Tenet has them everywhere, but especially in the conversations between protagonist and Priya, so make sure you note those if you want to watch and learn a little bit more about subtext. It's a really great, another kind of masterclass from Nolan about here's how you do this. One other thing to look for in the movie is anytime anyone mentions the word Tenet or does this thing, which is part of the symbolism and stuff of the film, anytime anybody does that, okay, there's subtext going on. So that should also be a clue. So if you hear the word Tenet, okay, ears prick up and pay attention because there's subtext happening there. And it's kind of like Nolan's going, hey, here's a little Easter egg for all you story lovers out there.
To say anything about a client would violate the tenets he lives by.
If tenets are important to you, then you can tell me everything.
All right, hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell. I really appreciate it. If there's another movie that you want me to pull apart, drop it in the comments below and I'll try to work that in the schedule. Thank you again for watching. When you go to tell a story that matters. See you later.